Welcome back to Simright Fashion Academy YouTube channel for another interesting tutorial. So in today's tutorial, I'll be teaching you how to make a beautiful back loops with lacings, as you can see right here, for a shift gown. Okay, so I'll be showing you how to draft this beautiful shift gown, how to sew in the back loops, the lining, everything you need to know for this lacing. Okay, so if this is what you want to learn, please stay tuned till the end of this tutorial. Thank you. Welcome back to Simright Fashion Academy YouTube channel for another interesting tutorial. So today's tutorial, we'll be making a shift gown, and this shift gown is not going to have a zipper, it's not going to have a button, but it's going to have back loops. So I'll show you how to go about back loops for this dress. So here I've already made my pattern. Center back and center front is going to be on fold for this pattern, and I've already added my ease, but I'm going to explain how many inches ease I added. So the neckline I'm using for this dress is 4 inches by 4 inches. So here I have 4 inches and here I have 4 inches. I don't want the neckline to be too big, I just want it around the neck. So that is why I'm making use of 4 inches. I've drafted my pattern for the front armhole and for the back armhole. From the mid armhole, I came in by 0.5 for the back, and for the front, I came in by 0.75. So here, I've already connected my waist, divide by 4. I've connected everything right here. Then I added my ease to the dress. So the ease I added to my dress is 1.5 of an ease. So I added 1.5 of an ease right here. So I just want to make little alterations on what I did here, because I use this pattern for something, okay, for another dress. So I want to make a little alteration to the dress. So the alteration I want to make, I'll be adding my pepper because I want to increase the hip area. I want to add a little more of an ease on the hip area. Okay, so now I'll bring back a piece of pepper now to make up for the length of my, okay, so I just want to add, so I'll be able to add ease of my choice to that point, to that part. Okay, so I've added. So now I want to make alterations starting from my chest. My chest divide by 4. From the center front, chest divide by 4 is 11.5. Then I'm adding 1 inch of an ease, 1 inch for this particular style of dress. And on the hip waist, I will still maintain my 1.5 inch. And then on my hip, I'm going to add 2.5. okay, so I just want it to actually I want the hip area to be big, a sort of. So I'm going to connect this way from here to here and from here to here. Okay, so I added 2.5 here. So if you want to make it 2 inches, you can, but I just want this area, the hip area, to be a little bit big. And then I'm going to take the measurement of what I have here on this hip area. I'm going to take the measurement from there. Here I have 14 inches, and I'll come over to the hem, including the hip, everything. I'll also make my 14 inches. So I'll just keep my ruler straight at that point. From that point, I'll mark out my hip area. So I'm going to use lining to turn this. I'm using a chiffon fabric for it. So I'll just cut. So my ease here is 2.5. okay, so by the time times 4, I'll have 10 inches. So if it's too much for you, you can do 2 inches, or you can even do the 1.5. But this is a free dress. I really want it to have a bit of an ease, so you can see the shape of the dress. So I'm going to cut my back neckline right now. I'll cut my back neckline, my back armhole, and I'll cut my shoulder seam line. So that is what we need for now. So I'm going to cut this my back pattern. Then once I'm done cutting my back pattern, I will come back to use the same pattern to cut the front. But meanwhile, this is what we want to do for the back design, which is going to have our loops. So this back design is going to have the loop, and I'm using this neckline for the loop. I'm extending my 4x4 to touch my chest line. So everything we have on this line is going to be open. Okay, so I'll just make a curve to my loop because I want the loop to have a curve this way. So we are going to sew our back loops all over. So now that I want to cut my back, this is what I will do. But I'm going to save this. After cutting the back, I'll bring it back, put it back together, and cut the front. So I'll just go ahead and cut. This is our back loop. Okay. So here I'm going to sew my loops. Of course, you are going to see how we are going to do it. So please save this. When we come back to cut the front, I'll also put it to cut the front. So this is what the back is going to look like. Like I said, it's going to be unfolded and it will have a loop. So I'm coming with my fabric now to cut this dress. I'll just place it on fold. Then I'll bring in my pattern while it's on fold and add my necessary seam allowances. So I'll quickly cut it right now, then I'll show you how many inches I added. Alright, so right now I'm done cutting and I've added my seam allowances on the armhole for the back 0.5, on the loop line 0.5, on the seam line 0.5. I have this part on fold, and then the length of the dress, I'm yet to cut it right away. So I'll finish cutting it and we'll move to the front. So I'm done cutting this back, so I'm going to set it aside. So I'll be using what I have right here on my pattern. I'll be using what I've cut on this dress to cut the lining. So I just place my lining on fold and I'm going to cut the lining as well. Okay, then our loops, we are going to sew it at the back. So I want us to cut the front right away. So in cutting the front, I'll bring back my pattern. Remember, you are supposed to save this. So I'll just gum it up now. I'll just come with a bit of pepper and so I've gummed it back and I'm going to cut out my neckline. So the neckline for this dress, I'm going to cut from this point. Let me trim off so this is how the pattern works. So the neckline, I'm going to cut it from the 4x4. Like I said, I did 4 inches by 4 inches because I don't actually want it too open. Okay, so 4 inches by 4 inches. So I'll place this on my front pattern. Then I'm going to cut I'm cutting away the armhole for the front. So you know the armhole is deeper on the front. So since it's deeper, I've cut out, and this is what our front looks like. So I'll place my fabric now and cut the front. Then we'll proceed to the sewing. Alright, so I've cut the front. So this is the front neckline, 0.5, 0.5. And 1 inch on the side, and front is also on fold. So now I'm taking off this pattern and I'll be using this to cut the lining. Okay, so it's actually going to be have a lining, but the lining is going to be halfway. So I place my lining cut for front and back, then we'll proceed to joining them together. Alright, so I'm done cutting both lining and fabric. So this is the back. I want to start sewing the loops. So for my back loops, I'll just go ahead and measure 0.5 inch off. And from that 0.5, I'm going to sew my loops at 0.75. Okay, that's interval of 0.75 or 1 inch. Okay, so we can do 1 inch, so it's not too close. So I'm marking out 1 inch, and these are the points I'm going to place my loops and sew. Okay, so I'll have the same mark on this part. I'll take off 1/2 inch, then I'll start marking 1 inch. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it's remaining 1. 9. So it has to be equal. So this is my eyelet lace or corset lace. So you can get this from the market. So if you ask them to give you cord for corset, is all over the places. So I'm using this to sew my loops. So I'll start my sewing of my loops. Okay, so this is how I'm going to sew the loops. So I'll just make the loops come a little bit closer. I'll sew one like this, I'll sew the other like that. So let's go and sew it right now. All right, so it's time for us to start sewing. So I'll start sewing the loops from here, and this is how I go about the sewing of the loop. So the first mark I made after 0.5, I'll drop my presser foot there, and I make sure I'm sewing. Another thing is you need to also make sure you are sewing at half an inch. Okay, after you have marked out that the 1 inch, you also have to mark out your half an inch. So what I mean is, this is my seam line. What you see me now marking is my seam line. So this seam line is very, very important, because that is what is going to guide my loop sewing. So you can see the direction I'm placing the loop, and I'm sewing on the seam line which I just marked now. So I'll back stitch, I bring in to the next one, still sewing on the seam line. Okay, so you can see how I'm sewing. So the next one, I'll just come this way, push it a little. So I'm going to sew on the next line. So the next line, here is it. So I'll keep using my scissors to push my loop. So you can see I'm forming my loop. I'll come over to the next line. So you just use your discretion to check, to make sure your loop is on the same length. So I'm still sewing on that same 0.5 line, which is my seam line. So you need to make that line if you actually want to sew your loop accordingly. So you can see the ones I made, you can see how they are. So I'll keep sewing and arranging it. So you can see I'm actually arranging it. So you need to use your eyes to match up your loops so they are there at the same line. Then I'm coming to the last one, which is the last loop. So I'll just place it the same way. And I'll back stitch at this point. So this is how I'm going to sew this other part too. I'm going to turn and you can see I'm facing my loop this way. So by the time we turn with our lining, you see we have the loop this way. Okay, so right now I'm done with the back loops, so you can see how my back loops are laying. So the next thing we want to do, you can see everything, the loops are facing this way, that way. So by the time we sew all of them, this is what we'll be having. By the time we sew our lining and give it a good press, we'll have the loops this way. So now I'm going to lay my lining on top of it, and I'm going to sew right on top of it and press on top of it as well. So I'll just go ahead and lay this. Can you see? So I'll just bring in my pin and secure from the beginning. I'm just going to secure it with my pin. I'll secure this with my pin as well. So I'm going to sew now. As I've held it with my pin, I'm going to match it together this way, and I'm following the already existing stitches I made with my loops to sew. So make sure it matches well. So I'll just take off my pin and go ahead to stitch. So you have to cut accurately, okay? If you want to do exactly what I'm doing here, you need to cut your and add your seam allowances accordingly. So I'm sewing right side to right side, okay? Right side to right side of the lining. So by the time we turn everything, we have the loops in between like this. Can you see? The loops are in between. So for you to achieve this, you have to cut exactly the same add the same seam allowance and cut exactly the same for lining and for fabric. So you can see everything matches up for me. And there our back stitch. So here I have my loop in between. Can you see? So I'm just trying to see if I'll back stitch, top stitch. So if I'm top stitching, I'm flipping every seam to the part of the lining for my top stitching. So I'll just go ahead and top stitch just neatly and slowly. So you can see how I'm spreading out my seams to be sure I top stitch nicely. So your top stitching has to be very, very, very close, as you can see. Alright, so now I'm done top stitching, and I'll go ahead and give it a good press. Okay, so I'm going to iron my, you can see the top stitches here. I'm going to lay my fabric this way, as you can see, then iron it out nicely. Then we'll be back to join the necklines. But before we join the necklines, I'm going to sew the front neckline. Okay, just like I sew here, I will sew the front neckline and top stitch as well. So before we go ahead, lovely people, so right now I'm done with the dress. I've inserted the sleeve, I've turned with my lining, as you can see. So I have my loops. Okay, so I've already put my back loops, as you can see. So that is how we come to the end of this tutorial, and I believe you learned a lot from this class. So what we actually have here is the back loop, the back, and this is the front. Okay, so there's no zipper to it, so you can wear it your shift gown. You can see how we shifted this gown from the actual fitted gown to the shift gown. So thank you for coming once again, and see you in the next class. Bye.